Hello, my name is Masai Inakage. I'm the Dean of Keio University Graduate School of Media Design. Welcome to the Serendipity series. It's an exciting talk, but by a very important and influential company, Designit. Before we go into this talk session, let me introduce ourselves a little bit. So some of you may not know who we are at Keio. So, as you may know, we are in a very rapid transformation, which is called digital transformation or digital transformation in Japanese. So it's the same thing. Some people call it the fourth industrial revolution or 第四次産業革命. The most important part of this revolution is its fast pace, and also the amount of influence in the society. Not only certain sectors, but the entire industry is going to be influenced and is already under transition. Also is our lifestyle. Everyday life is influenced by this digital transformation. So at Keio, we thought we want to create a new type of leaders who can lead this way of transformation and translation from one society to the next. When we envisioned this new school, we just celebrated 10th year anniversary over the weekend. We wanted to create a new creative-minded society or creative society where every one of us has the ability to create and be very creative. In fact, World Economic Forum is forecasting one of the top 3 skills in 2020 includes creativity. So at KMD or Keio Media Design, this graduate program is trying to create new type of creative society ourselves through various projects and contributing through economic and social impact. We are also training the new type of leaders or leaders to be at a graduate program, master's level and PhD level. So we have made strategic decisions. We are using both English and Japanese as a formal language of training. We have multiple physical footprints or satellites. This is our headquarter campus. We also have an office or space in Osaka, in Tokyo, as well as in Singapore. We do project-led training to our students, and we collaborate between students and faculties and external partners, private companies, public sectors, etc. So it is important that we now have over 53% representing the international community, so Japanese students are not the majority anymore, which is very, very rare in Japanese universities. You can also see there's lots of different type of background and cultures. And it's exciting to talk to one another, discover every day about the difference. So in order to influence and create the creative society, we have a so-called innovation pipeline where we envision, come up with creative ideas, then we take those ideas forward as much as we can. There are lots of failure. We will learn from failure. And then hopefully we'll hit the marketplace or try to solve the global or regional agenda in front of us. Some of the outcomes over the 10 years, we launched a social flower service with a company in Japan called Hana Cupid, which is the largest florist network in Japan. We co-designed and developed an eyewear called Jin's Meme, which it looks like an ordinary eyeglass but has sensors, so it can detect your fatigue, where you're paying attention, and all these other things, so that we can have a service for you. We have partnering with Fukui Prefecture Sabai City, known for Japanese lacquer, to revitalize and strengthen the Japanese lacquer industry. So it's the crafts-based design, trying to modernize the very traditional, long-standing industry in Japan. Recently, we have started a company called Telexistence Inc. with these robots. They are controlled by humans, and the robots can also give you five sense feedback, so tactile, vision, and auditory, and other things. We are in the process of commercializing this autonomous vehicle-like robot for the agriculture industry. You can see there's a combination of product and service and other things combined in one package. We also are designing business models. We tackle legal issues if we need to change the legal structure in order to make these products into the marketplace. We also have several consortium to make impactful activities. This is called Information Bank Consortium that looks at people's security and private information. We also have a project called Superhuman Sports. Tokyo is awarded 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games. We want to invent new sports like Harry Potter's Quidditch, but with actual technology that we can really work and compete in the year 2020. We are also doing a grand design for a community building of a Tokyo district called Takeshiba to be open in 2020. So this district will become a Tokyo hub for creative arts, innovation, and all these things, exciting things that Mikal is going to talk about. So with this, let's move into this exciting talk by Mikal Hallstrup. But before I invite him on stage, let me briefly read out his resume so that you know better, and so that with the background of his bio, you understand and appreciate the talk better. So Mikal is the president and founder of Designit, one of the world's largest strategic design firms. Now it is part of Wipro Digital. Designit unlocks the magic at the intersection of strategy, technology, and design. Being one of the driving forces behind Designit's vision, values, and creative culture, Mikal is passionate about the power of design to drive change and growth in industry and society. I think the word society matches with KMD's interest, not just one particular industry. For more than 2 decades, Mikal and the now over 500 members at Designit have been working together with clients to translate user needs into compelling products, services, and also experiences. Similar to KMD, we do products such as IoT, we do services, we have service design course, and also experience design is our core effort at KMD. Besides being an active speaker at global design and business conventions, Mikal has been chairing the jury at Index Award, the world's largest monetary design award, focusing on design that improves the life at the global scale. So without further ado, please welcome Mikal.
So I got one instruction, and I was almost messing it up. Can you hear me okay? Oh, wow, that's great. It ain't too loud? All right, good. So yeah, thanks a lot for the nice words, and thanks for having us. Thanks for having me, and I guess it's fair to say that we're super excited about what's going on here at KMD. So I think it's not going to be the last time that we're here. So today what I would like to do is talk a bit about design, what it was, what it is, and what it's going to be in the future. Exciting times where, everyone's a designer, it seems, right? I think you feel that competition too. Talk a bit about Designit, so you have some background on us, where we come from. And then a bit on this, try to bridge, what's going on in the Fintech space with, the social development, the sustainable development goals, which is like an interesting kind of cross. Let's see if we can kind of dovetail that beautifully, okay? And then we want to share some, finally share some of our experience on you guys. I mean, either working in a design-related industry, a buyer, a design, consultant, whatever. And some of you still at school. I think it's worth sharing our experience and how to work with big, heavy, not always very, open-minded industries. I think that's, we find that all over the world. So that's basically what I want to share with you. So it's 2 hours of content, okay? Squeezed down into a 50-minute presentation. So you better, really be awake, okay? Actually, this was supposed to run in the background just to show that we're very, human-focused company, a very human-shaped company, made of like great people with a strong, strong passion for design. And we think that passion is really needed to do this. I mean, if you're not passionate about changing the world, if it's just something you say, if you're not passionate about like improving things, not only the visible, beautiful things, but also like other structures in society that needs fixing, then, don't go into the design business because it's not very, it's not super profitable. You work day and night, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and sometimes you even, make a startup and make, I don't know, 1 billion, euros or dollars or yen or whatever. But as you can see, we have a lot of fun, and but where we started out basically 27, 28 years ago was like 2 industrial designers. I was one of them, straight out of school. So with a batchmate, I started Designit. And that was pretty much, stuff that you could explain to your mother, your father, and your kids. I mean, we designed telephones, like real industrial design, real things, okay? Hang on. Oh, works. Insulin pens, not only like fancy phones and stuff that you don't need, but also like life-saving devices for people who really, really need this. Later on, we kind of went into a lot of doing audio products, consumer electronics, and these are just some highlights. But always we try to add something extra, to the experience. I mean, who says that a wireless speaker? This is like almost 10 years old now. Why do you put that like fabric on it? What does that have to do with sound? In our world, it has a lot to do with sound because you want to feel sound. Like touching that one, it feels warm. It has a human kind of experience to it. So that's why we always try to add something, extra to the experience. Maybe some of you guys have seen this one around. We designed tons of products for, brands like JBL and so on. And adding light to this thing, well, I'm curious to see what sound looks like, not just what it sounds like. And apparently, a lot of other, people around thought that was a great idea because now, there's light in every loudspeaker. I mean, and also look at the cars, the headlights and architecture, LEDs everywhere. And I think that's also what design is about. It's not just making useful things. It is also about like making beautiful things that give something back to us, something emotional. Are you with me? Uh-huh. So, but then, shit happens, and I think in 2007 or 8, where all the phone, the mobile, phone makers were making tons of like different handsets, physical handsets, right? Sony Ericsson, Nokia, and so on. And basically, I think Nokia had like one service, like this Ovi store, that went nowhere, it seems. And suddenly there was a new player on the market, right? That turned the whole thing upside down. One handset, I mean, that was the iPhone, not a secret, but 1,000 services, the apps, right? We call this the product service shift. And I think in many different ways, it really influenced every industry, including the design industry, because suddenly there wasn't a lot of like, physical real estate to design. Suddenly everything looked pretty much the same, and everything happened on the screen and on that thin little, bezel around the phone. That was what was left, for the industrial designers. But a super exciting kind of shift. And for us, it really, kicked off the whole Fintech movement, right, inside Designit, because we used to do mostly healthcare design. Today, Fintech, insurance tech, pension technology is our biggest vertical, our biggest, field of work. And we made this, that's like 8 years ago or something, for one of the big Danish banks, the first, I think one of the world's first mobile banks that was not just, take the whole bank and squeeze it into a mobile phone, but something that was built bottom up with a, remember it's 8, 10 years old, with a new navigation system, the wheel. So we had a lot of clients afterwards because this was a huge success in the Scandinavian market, came to us and said, can you make us something with that wheel on? Typical, some people think like that. We need that wheel, And as you can imagine, a lot of, the companies wanted more things in the wheel. So we ended up with like 21 things, and you need like very small fingers, to press that. So I think what we learned back then was less crap in the app, keep it simple, okay? Sometimes you have to say no to things and just, 6 simple things to make users happy, okay? And also, like back then, a lot of us were thinking about what would happen, everybody's competing with everyone. What if Apple, or some other big player, would go into, the consumer banking industry? What would that look like? I think it would force very conservative banks all over the world, including Japan, to rethink, the whole thing about like customer experience and what have you. Yeah, just a bit about us. 500 creative folks, strategists, technologists, human specialists, and with an amazing office here in Tokyo. We've been around for 5 years, so that's been pretty tough, but today we're looking good. We're having a great business here, having a lot of fun, and hopefully help, shape, make a lot of great products and services out of our Tokyo office. I guess you know this, but this is our mix, our toolbox: digital design, service design, business and venture design, product design. That's more like, in the IoT space nowadays. And I think that's where we have like an interesting conversation to have with KMD as well. Brand design and design research, the whole discipline of like figuring out what to make, because sometimes some of you have tried that. You work on a thing like for a couple of years, you find out that you've been making a bank app for teenagers that don't exist because they don't care, So design research is still a very, very important field. Even though sometimes the best design research takes half a second and it's called a bright idea. That happens sometimes, Then you want to skip that. Some of the clients that we work with, and double-clicking on banks, we did a lot of banking stuff. I think, and some of you Designit guys would agree, no more banking apps and stuff, but hey, we're good at this, so why don't we just be, the world champs? And it's actually kind of fun because banks, they want to do new stuff. I mean, who would have thought that, 10 years ago? They're pretty progressive. And what we're trying to do is, move all our clients up the design ladder, get them away from not using design. Nobody's not using design anymore. But still, there's some that consider design an exercise of just like prettification or decoration, spray on some nice color late in the process. But basically, where you want to be is, up at the 2 higher steps, where you, at a corporate level, treat design as a process, or maybe even as a strategy. Maybe Uniqlo would be one of the companies having design as a strategy, very visible. IKEA, Apple would be other companies, and some of the big car makers. No decisions in the boardroom are being made without thinking of design. So, getting a bit closer to the fintech, side of it, I think what we've realized is that everything we do nowadays is with a partner. I think you guys talk a lot about partners as well, because you can't do much on your own. So we work together, and the examples I'm going to show you today work with institutions like the Copenhagen Fintech Lab. I just returned from a couple of years in New York. You can probably hear that. And then coming back to Copenhagen, it's pretty interesting to see, the really the startup scene is on the rise. So the Copenhagen Fintech Lab has about 200, it's a big incubator that's owned or, funded by all the big banks, has about 200 startups at different stages, which I think is pretty interesting. So we partner with them. And also covering the other part of the story on this sustainable development goals, we're working with UN Live, which is not a bank, which is something totally different, but again, a partnership. And we're better together with partnerships. We can really do a lot of things, and I hope I'm going to show you today. Other institutions like Index and so on. before we dive in, I just want you to reflect a bit on this and also see, where do you want to go in the future? Now that everybody wants to be designer, I mean, the big consulting firms, the global services firms, they all talk about like customer journeys, touch points, experience design, and so on. But I know, looking from the presentations, that still what we do is very, very different. It's a different approach. So you could say, and I don't want to be stereotyping here and not say that these are the bad guys and we're the good guys. I think we need each other, and I think we need to, mix our mindsets. But I think it's fair to say that business consultants are very focused on optimizing things, and they're very focused on business, okay? Advertising, on the other hand, they're focused on communicating, the benefits to the market, right? I would say they are consumer-focused, very, and they should be, driving, revenue up. So that little industry right in the middle, okay? It's not the most profitable one, it's not the most powerful one, but it's pretty influential, if you ask me. That's the guys, that's us, I would say us, the ones who imagine the new things, So we do that in a very human-focused way. We don't think consumer, we think human needs first. I mean, going back to design, what matters? I mean, what does actually matter? A new coffee maker, a new chair? Let's find out, okay? But I think that's the interesting place to be because it focuses on real human needs. And maybe like one of our clients said, maybe my next, management consultant is a designer. And we said, yes, 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 you totally got us right, okay? So clients come to us with a lot of like interesting problems or challenges, like complicated business problems sometimes. So we have like 400 million fans around the world. We're a pro sports, football club. How do we engage all these people, online? Helping, old-fashioned cab companies, taxi companies to compete with Uber because they need to do so. Uber copied the cab business now. They're copying Uber and so on, but I guess this is the way it's going, Or how are we going to buy cars in the future? That's an interesting. Are we going to buy cars at all? I mean, probably a lot of you guys don't even want to have a car because it's insurance, it's parking, it's like polluting and a lot of stuff. But car makers think a lot about what's going on in our heads and if we're going to buy cars in the future. And also getting rid of replacing conventional showrooms with the digital car showrooms. Or what does an airline meal look like? We did this for SAS, Scandinavian Airlines, based on a lot of talking with travelers. We realized that nobody wants this big box of cold food, like a big brick that fills up all your workspace. So basically what a lot of travelers told us, why don't you make something small? So we did, and actually what came out of this is this nice little food cube. So if you can't eat all your food, you just leave it in there. You put the lid on the box, shove it under your seat, and you can work with your computer. Or even you can use it as takeaway when you're leaving the plane, because nobody wants food waste, okay? So with that safe little lunchbox, we solved a lot of problems, other than just looking great. More and more, our clients come to us these invisible kind of not very design-focused, heavy industry companies, like this one, a tool maker, that we helped come up with a new value proposition. So if you're a tool maker, it sounds pretty, not very sexy, but what about being the company that shapes the steel that shapes the world? I think that's beautiful, instead of being just a tool maker. Or can you help us make these big systems a bit more, human-friendly, human-shaped? That's not something you will find in the design magazines. We think it's damn useful because it impacts a lot of lives out there. It impacts, efficiency at work, errors and mistakes not being made. Because if you design these big systems, energy trading platforms or whatever, there's a lot of benefit to gain. It's not like a consumer app, but a big professional system. And I think designers need to go in there as well, even though we're not getting famous, but we got to go in there because there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. Some banks come to us and say, help us create the startup. I mean, that's typical banks that will disrupt us in 3 years, and that's pretty exciting, saying, who will eat my lunch in a couple of years? Or create banks for people who don't care. I mean, teenagers don't care. They don't even know what a bank is. My kids, they don't want a bank. So how do we kind of, you know, create brands that appeal to them? At the total opposite, and maybe this is where, you know, the global goals, the United Nations global goals, really, you know, cross over, you know, with like commercial kind of design work. How do you make sure that people, say in Latin America, that are not banked currently, that don't trust banks, how do we get them on board? How do we make them open bank accounts? That's an interesting exercise. So, but a totally different one. Big banks asking for scalable design systems because you have a brand, but then, I mean, also like here at a, you know, a media-focused school, what do you do when your brand kind of falls apart because, you know, omni-channel, cross-channel, it's just messed up. So the way you look in a newspaper is not the way you look online and not what you look like, you know, mobile. So we create these big, robust, you know, design systems as well. Pretty simple, most of them. You can argue whether it's beautiful design work. We think it makes a lot of sense because it makes, you know, these companies cope with their own design in a much easier way. Like infographics, you know, everything part of a brand manual. How to engage locals in elder care. Or here in Tokyo, I guess that would be, you know, with robots. Or, which is interesting. Do you want a robot specialist to design that thing or a human specialist? I would go, you know, with a human specialist. I mean, seriously. Designing people off the street with service design, reducing waiting lines at hospitals is also what design is used for nowadays. And the whole thing comes back to one simple point. How do we put people first? How do we put people at the center? And not in the middle of everything like that. This is not what we want. Or like that, you know, we create new, you know, access systems for parking lots and stuff. Still, 99% of all people using, you know, like these things are afraid that this damn thing will hit their car or it maybe even hit them on the head, you know. So we design, I don't know who, but shitty things. And then we put up a sign saying, hey, watch out, you know, this system might be hitting you on your head, you know. That's not designed to me. Or how many of you guys have struggled with the old USB, turning it upside down? Billions of people are trying this every day. And I don't know who figured that out, but it's a no-brainer to me, right? I mean, why don't you just like USB-C, make it either way? It's much easier, right? I even found a user manual online that says how to USB. Oh, step one, it does not enter, you know, the slot. Step two, rotate. 3, success, okay? So, pretty crazy. Or what if we, you know, the design industry, for example, came up with a usability marking? So not like an energy efficiency marking, but saying all this, you know, sorry for the word, shitty things, crappy things that don't work, you know, setting up your printer or whatever, some complicated device. What if we gave everything like in a global usability marking? I think a lot of, you know, brands would start thinking, we need some design, you know, to this. You tried this? Japan, I think, is pretty good when it comes to packaging. I mean, making beautiful, very usable packaging that actually you can open. But there's a lot of that stuff around, you know. So again, like, I don't know, it's kind of a human, I don't know, it's in us somehow. A group of specialists, they sit down and they say, hey, let's create the perfect packaging, you know, material efficient, sustainable, just 1-2 materials, it's tamper-proof, it's safe and everything. They forgot one simple thing. That we care about, like packing things out, not about packing them in, you know, we care about the unboxing, okay? But somehow that always happens, you know? And I'm gonna show you a little video. You won't understand a word because it's in Austrian, but it's in the 70s when, you know, that great new invention, the milk carton, was launched, claiming that now we found something better, you know, than the milk bottle. It's gonna disrupt, you know, the milk bottle. Have a look. So they're discussing and, okay, show us the thing. I mean, sounds really cool, you know. Yeah, it goes a bit like this. You know, you open it here. Then you just, I mean, tear that off. Yep, here you know where the perforation is. So there we go. But you know, sometimes it's a bit like, we got to work on this, okay? But it's in the market now, so we're going to fix that later, okay? Well, hell, it's really tough to open. I'm going to grab, you know, my scissors. It's all going to be fine, okay? So here we go. Yep, and the other one as well. Yeah, he's explaining, you know, while doing this. And cut a bit more here. He's designing now, you know, fixing things. And then, you know, oh, that tip needs to be, you know, trimmed a bit. So I'm going to trim that too. Whoop, here we go. It's going to be all okay. And actually, you know, it pours, but it pours backwards. And actually, like it or not, this is an experience. It just happens to be a very bad one. And scaling that up, you know, that's this way of making new things. How many of you guys have, like, feel great when you go through or feel shitty when you go through airport security? I mean, I'm the first one to raise my hand. I don't think that's a nice experience at all. And, you know, again, millions of people go through this every day. I would assume that us, you know, in here, engineers, designers, what have you, product people, service people, systems people, I think we could make this a better experience, maybe even more safe, and I think more productive, you know. So I'd love to work on that, but I guess it's going to be really a tough job. So I think what we got to do is not just, like, you know, work in a human-centric way, treating, you know, design process as a very analytical, theoretical thing. What I think we need to do is add, you know, our heart. That's a brain too. Think with our hearts, maybe even with the guts, you know. Sometimes we do things because it feels right, okay? Trust your guts and trust your heart, not just, you know, the half side of your brain, okay? So now it's time to lean back a bit because I'm going to show you some nice cases that we did. This is 2 Danish cases, actually. It's a small country. We can be, you know, say things we can't say in the US and stuff. So these are very provocative projects. One is an insurance, you know, a startup meant for young people who don't care about insurance. And the other one is about pension. I'm going to show you both. So basically what we did for a big insurance company, that was a corporate startup, we created a new brand that's called Undo. And it's basically cut the crap insurance, so simplifying insurance. We wanted to create like a wicked, like a cool insurance brand. Think of that. There's not a lot of, like, cool brands out there, and it takes a lot of courage for a big insurance firm to really go with us that way. And it's called Undo. Like, if, you know, shit happens, you can just press undo, you're happy again, okay? That's kind of, you know, the storyline. And then look at this. Everybody makes mistakes, but that's a misspelling, right? Mistakes. So you will see that going through, you know, the whole thing. The imagery, right, like broken glass, right, middle of a party, damn, you know, or broken, you know, calculator, or damn, I smashed my golden ride, you know, damn, what I'm going to do. Hopefully you're insured by Undo. So this is what the campaign looks like, and it goes, you know, the tone of voice goes a bit like this. So just because there's other, you know, idiots out in the streets than yourself, okay? It's not always your fault. Or leaking washing machine. And I mean, these images, I mean, they create a lot of conversation, you know, in media and amongst, you know, young consumers. So this is basically, it's almost like piss, like shit, 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 or damn, 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 you know. And well, like this one, you know, damn, you know. And usually you don't use these words, you know, in stuff like this, but this is the whole tone of voice, basically. And then the trick here is we want to create, with Undo, the fastest way from shit, you know, I broke that thing, to pyt in Danish, which means never mind, I'm insured, okay? The shortest way between piss and pyt, okay? A lot of people are laughing at this, which is a good sign of engagement, okay? Then we try that on, you know, outdoor, different, you know, treatments. I just want to show you some design execution as well. I think at this, you know, at Designit, we have a lot of, like, interesting conversations right now on, not on strategic design, but on design craftsmanship, making great, you know, design craftsmanship, great execution. Oh yeah, that was actually fun. So we cover broken phones, missed flights, slippery fingers, stolen bikes. We don't cover drunk texting, okay? And this I'm not gonna translate. You know, fortune cookie, your bike's probably gonna be stolen today, okay? Good luck. And a bit on the app, so the whole enrollment, which is super important. I mean, you wanna do that in less than a minute because young people are not very patient. So help us find the right insurance for you. How old are you? 23. What do you do for a living? Where do you live? Type that in and give us a second. We're, you know, looking into it and we're gonna get back to you with a great quote, and that happens like 20 seconds after. So, and a lot of great swag. I mean, you guys, you have an insurance company, right? Do they give you great swag like t-shirts and tote bags? No. So why don't we try that, you know? So basically, this project included name, coming up with a name, undo, tone of voice, brand design, business design, which is an important part of this. It's, you know, you very often end up going deeper than just, you know, making a nice logo, digital and mobile, and brand guidelines. And the whole thing was done in a 6-week sprint process. That's more and more, you know, normal, typical, that you spend like 6 to 8 weeks and then, you know, the whole thing is done. The next one, pension for millennials, is an interesting space too. And the reason why I'm showing you not like banking things, we did hundreds of banking things, but it seems that now, you know, the banking industry is in like such a, just on a roll. And now, you know, insurance technology, pension technology is really, you know, where a lot of the action is. So look at this and it's gonna be, just lean back, enjoy. This was, you know, the brand teaser, okay? Here we go. So we think this is, you know, could be the future of pension. And what we did in terms of, you know, the naming process, you know, there's like childhood, adulthood, parenthood. And then, you know, when you get old, when you need your pension, why don't we look at this as like a gray period of your life? Why don't we call this grandhood, okay? And which I think is a beautiful name for a nice period of your life. So here's some of, you know, the design executions on this. And again, you know, human at the center. Think pension, just simpler. Nobody wants complicated nowadays. So creating all these like different, you know, collaterals, which going back to design craftsmanship, I think is a super important thing. And also bear in mind, guys, there's a life beyond the screen, you know. So you want to do this, create the typeface for it, infographics, even animated ones, and really have a visual identity and a value proposition that, you know, excites people. And again, simple apps, again, nobody wants complicated. And then once you have your design system in place, you know, the rollout is pretty easy. You can do a lot of exciting things. So this one, in this case, what's the news here? Basically that, you know, fintech startups, insurance tech, pension tech, it's built on walls, not in a spreadsheet. It's built with Post-its, and it's not built by bankers or insurance people. It's actually built by design teams working together with, you know, the bankers. Then, are you still with me? Okay, so now here's the bridge, and we're gonna cross, you know, that river and go into the Sustainable Development Goals, okay? Because Designit, we're not a charity organizations, but we love to do this work for, you know, NGOs. And I think, to be very honest, I think some of our best projects that we're most proud of is actually for, you know, the not very commercial type of project. So we have a global partnership with an organization called UN Live, which is basically an organization started a couple of years ago that works with the Sustainable Development Goals. What they started out with is climate change, and more specifically, climate, you know, the refugees that are a result of climate change, okay? So basically the first year, I mean, the theme that we've been working on is called People on the Move. so people without a home, with a permanent home. And that sometimes turns into like half of your life, even all of your life. People are born, and kids are born in refugee camps, and there's a lot of like things that need to be done there. But you're familiar with the 17 goals. And basically, so what this organization does is it takes on the goals. It's a museum with 3 global platforms. There's a live online platform, which is a global digital engagement platform. There's a partner network of people and institutions, and there's going to be a real building, like a real museum, which is going to be a hub for all the solutions that this like people-driven organization is going to work on. Then what they want to do is, to put it bluntly, move from a lot of talk to action. So moving from being passive kind of observers, and yes, we know the the development goals, and turn people, especially young people, into active participants. So a very activist kind of approach that was very much liked by the larger UN organization. And then what we've been working with them on is creating the strategy for engagement, because once you have this idea about like engaging the world in the Sustainable Development Goals, the whole kind of design process just starts. I mean, how are you going to do this? In what way are you going to do this? So we help them fleshing out these like different strategies, like working, we want people to work with their head, with their hearts, and with their hands. And right now we're working on developing programs and content, which is a very big and fluffy job, and it's our job kind of to make it very tangible. So basically, what UN Live has been doing is starting out in 2015. 2016, it's a lot of work you put into this. They were endorsed, they were authorized by the larger United Nations system. 2018, that's now. Much of the funding is secured. We're not doing this, we're just partnering with them and offering our design help and our assistance, but working on the development of the strategy, the content, and the program. So actually what's going to happen, And then next year, there will be public launch of more stuff. And then, the long-term goals is to create new campaigns and eventually end up with opening of, the live building, a museum that's going to be in Copenhagen, and then have 100 million, active engagements on UN Lives, all these platforms that we're going to create. So it's a pretty ambitious plan, and it goes a bit like this. So how can a museum, we discussed that a lot, is a museum the right word to use for this? It sounds a bit like a building with old stuff inside. But I think right now we're going with the assumption that a museum can be a lot of different things and a great way of engaging people all over the world. So I just want to show you some of that strategy work that we did. It looks very simple, but it's actually super important when you go out and have like some kind of strategic foundation for your campaigns and your online engagement. So here are some beliefs. You could even call it the belief system, that we think people drive change, not just politicians. We believe in working with our hearts, our heads, our hands. We think that bottom up and top down need to go together. We want to be experiential. We want to play and learn. And most of all, like I mentioned, we want to bridge awareness and action so that it's not just talk, but also action. And we fundamentally believe that all action counts. So whatever you do is twice as good as doing nothing. Inspire, connect, and activate is a very central part of that. And also, infusing this belief in people that, you can make a difference. So, first of all, I'm a part of the world. I'm a part of this earth, this planet, and I'm an important part of it. I can even change it. And, going into that stage of, hey, I am really changing the world. So what we're working on right now is a campaign that has like 3 acts. We're working on, I can show you. I don't want to say a lot about this, but this is very initial strategic design work. So still a bit fluffy, you might say, but this, is a big thing to undertake. So it's not like the pension app I showed you. So creating this program, which is Pals for Change, basically first roll is on YouTube, to engage influencers in engaging other people, have them as ambassadors, create the engagement out there, celebrate the progress that we're making, and also make things, spread so that we can get these global YouTube stars, get regional YouTube stars on boards, and then also at a very local level. And all this for creating content. Then we're working on a festival that's going to be traveling around the world at a very sketch kind of, this has taken a lot of conversation. It looks just like a very easy sketch to make, but actually it's you have to create the right platform for this. First one we assume will be in Copenhagen, but we need to create a concept that's robust and simple enough so that it can roll out in Joburg, Tokyo, or all over the world in cities. And then the final part, that was kind of just like an idea that we got. Why don't we make a mobile game as well? Because we know how much gaming all over the world engages, young people and kids in good ways and bad ways. But we're working on that as well, because we know this is a way of really, making this spread and create a lot of change and engage local communities in whatever, kind of thing. Cleaning beaches or, for plastic bottles, what have you. We got to start somewhere. So, it's one ambitious goal, and we're in the first year with UN Live, and we're going to keep working with them as they go along. And is it profitable? No, it's not, but it matters. It's very meaningful, and we're super proud of, working with them. So design is about impact, but as a design firm, your impact is a lot of small projects. We're not like one big, say, Twitter or Facebook. We have a lot of small impacts, but we think the sum of it makes a difference. Then another thing that I just wanted to share with you and start that conversation, you're familiar with this wheel, right? Increasingly, we see that center part being ethics. So design and designers often end up in these very interesting conversation on ethics. So should we do this or should we not do this? You know that a lot of innovations that disrupt things and transform things end up solving one thing and then creating sometimes 10 new problems, right? We all experience that. There's always a flip side of the coin. In Oslo, where our colleagues are up in Norway, they were approached by a company saying, hey, we developed this tactical vest for soldiers that can protect the soldiers. And we thought, wow, isn't that great? There's technology inside, we can work on the ergonomics. But thinking of it is that if we protect one life, and then she, the soldier, is able to shoot 3 other, enemy soldiers, do we want to be part of this? We ended up voting on it, and said, if we don't want to put that stuff on our website, if it's too complicated, then we should not be doing this. We ended up saying no, and I think designers very often end up in these awkward, how do you reduce the harmful consequences of smoking? E-cigarettes? Do you want to work on it or not? I mean, that's a personal, individual choice, but very often when you create the new things, you end up in these very, complicated situations. So Uber or any, app ride service is the same thing, with self-driving cars and stuff. Hey, it's going to be great for everyone. Yeah, and a lot of drivers are going to be, unemployed. What are we going to do about this? So when you create that solution, you have to think of, all the ramifications and the results as well, the unwanted consequences of your innovation. And again, I'd love to work on, that digital UX experience on the screen, but I don't want to make the guy over there, unemployed and, take away his livelihood. So now to the last part. I think I'm running out of time, but I thought we just wanted to share some of, the things that we've found to be true, working with design for quite some time. And also to you guys, especially you guys at KMD, remember that design goes beyond the screen, okay? It's physical, it's digital, and in this case with the self-driving car, it's some strange hybrid in between. I don't know whether that's physical or digital. I don't care. I think it's a super exciting thing to work on. And I don't know if we're going to cook our food in our cars in the future. We're going to make homework with our kids there. Maybe IKEA wants to move into that space because it's a living room on wheels. I don't know. But the designers, those who invent the new, have to think of what do we want to have in that car in the future. Then some interesting stuff, and I guess you're talking about this too. We're getting more and more of these like designing things you can't see that are very important, like brand touch points, like digital assistants, for example. So our office in San Francisco have this nice little process. So they say, we switched from like prototyping. Now we talk about proto-talking, okay? So have a look at this, and there's gonna be sound on this. You know these three guys, right? Okay? We can make nice industrial design, put on some texture, and give them a nice brand. But actually, the most important thing is what you can't see, but which is the whole experience. Asking
I'm
her.
old enough that the engineers trust me to use the internet.
So asking, Google Home, how old are you? He would answer like this. Then,
I'm 2 in human years, 14 in dog years, and 25 in cat years. I think AI years are marked by nanoseconds, so that makes me like a skrillion.
that's Alexa, What's going on here is a very, very, important brand experience. Somebody has to design this. I think it's us somehow. Now have a look at, Apple's HomePod. So how old are you?
Well, the humans have certainly aged me. That's for sure.
So in the future, it's not just like voice command, like what's the weather like outside and stuff. I mean, you want to have more personal, like emotional, intimate conversations. And I think this is going to be a big, big, field of investment for a lot of, technology brands, also beyond, the big tech companies. And inspire with words. Why am I saying this? Because think of it. When somebody put fin and tech together, that sparked a lot of change. It gave a whole, big, stiff, dusty industry new hope. And suddenly, hey, it's not banking, it's fintech. So we see a lot of our clients looking, for their tech in a way. In education, it's edutech, insurtech. We talked about that, pension tech, or even property tech, prop tech. The people who deal with real estate and, real estate development. So the reason why I'm saying this is that, when you're in front of, clients or partners, whatever, sometimes simple words can inspire a lot of change and can really help you drive the conversation into the right direction. Maybe you don't want to talk about like just transformation and stuff, but maybe come up with new words, Designers can do this. You're not going to be laughed out of the room. Say, proto-talking. That makes a lot of sense when you're working with voice. I mean, why are we not talking about this? Somebody came up with the, we've been talking about touch points. Our clients are fed up with this. What about like talk points, these like voice things, or even trust points, in a world that lacks trust? I mean, we don't trust what's in our food. Is the car going to kill me, my self-driving car? What are the banks doing with my money? And what about my data? A world with a big trust deficit. Why can't we turn, touch points into trust points? Interesting question. And then again, I mean, essence and presence, what's inside and what it looks like on the outside needs to go hand in hand. But I guess we all realize that it is, at the end of the day, always essence before presence, right? So ask why do we want this? And then you can build, the presence of the brand around it. But you have to answer these fundamental questions first. That's what a client told us. And I think, especially here in Japan, I think it's super relevant. One of the internal corporate startups that we worked with in a bank, so we asked her, so what do you think? That was because there was a journalist there. So why do you, what was your strategy? I mean, you made a very successful startup inside a very innovation kind of, resistant, immune, big, like corporate, complex setting. How did you succeed with that corporate startup? Because it looked so simple. She said, well, I just kept going until somebody pulled me back, my boss. okay? She was a very brave woman, you know, and I think we can learn a lot from this because a lot of us still ask for, hey, can I do this? No, you cannot. Okay, I'm not gonna do it, okay? This is not a way to create the new. You have sometimes to go out on a limb, take a risk, and maybe sometimes risk your job even, you know, or your reputation. Keep going until somebody pulls you back. Add always, always, always. I mean, clients, I mean, it's a stupid word, it's partners, okay? But what you want to do in the process, talking about co-creation and what have you, you want to add what we call client talent. Our clients have a lot of experience, a lot of talent, and I don't think always, you know, a lot of design research and, you know, our best creative genius, we can't live without, you know, our clients bringing their, you know, talent on board as well. 50% design firm, 50% client, I think that's the way it goes. Even though when I show you the cases, makes us sound like the hero that creates everything. We did this and we did that. Fact is, our clients are always, you know, a big, big part of the success. And then, maybe I don't need to read that out, but guys, if you design things, and then somebody, you know, an app, a ticketing experience, whatever, you know, getting into the subway, swiping your card, and it doesn't work, and you say, hey, it's because you're doing this wrong. Gonna stop you right there. If you need to explain, it's not design, you know, and that's the whole point of this. You want, you know, mistakes and errors and, like, you know, experience bugs. That's part of the process, not part of the result. So this, if you need to explain, it's not good, it's not design. Beauty is important, makes people happy. I think for a lot of years we talked a lot about, like, design is not about beautification, but I think a lot of us have come to find out that actually beauty is very important because it makes people's, you know, lives better. Yeah, don't make it complicated. I mean, I hear myself sometimes, you know, making the whole design, not thinking, but design talking, very academic, okay, because you want it to sound expensive, complicated, and, like, very, you know, serious. You know, try to explain this to kids, you know, like in eighth grade or in kindergarten. That's an interesting exercise. I think we got to take the whole design conversation back and really be able to explain this to our mom, our dad, our grandmother, our kids. Don't make it complicated. Design is not very complicated. It's a lot of common sense. It's about people. That's at least what we think. We don't have any design kings or, you know, design prima donnas. Everything is done in teamwork. And this is actually, believe it or not, the last slide. And I'm going to read this out because I think it's a beautiful, beautiful way of coining what design is all about. I mean, you can even close your eyes if you want to just listen to it. So John Heskett, who passed away a couple of years, a good friend of mine, said these, like, very wise words. Design is the human capacity to shape and make our environment in ways that satisfy our needs and give meaning to our lives. And going back to what's on that sign over there, you know, design what matters, we think if it gives meaning to people's lives, if it matters to them, we think it does a lot of good on the bottom line as well. And I think that would be my closing words, other than the thank you for listening, and thanks for having me up here.
So we have 25 more minutes to go, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for the audience to be participating in this very important topic of what design is about. But before we do that, let me start posing a few questions that I took lots and lots of notes. And one thing that really inspired me towards the end is about this experience ethics, economics ethics kind of contrast. And in your slide of experience ethics topic, you said, for example, Uber introduces a new business, a new job, while you're also kicking out some of the existing ones. Is it correct that you think we want to avoid that to happen? Or because when we try to shift from one society to the other, in the past, various types of industrial revolutions, there's always a case that one industry gets declined and one industry emerges. And therefore, there are lots of jobs lost, lots of jobs created. So can you expand on what you said?
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, and I think a very good observation. And I don't think we've not found the answer, but we're trying to drive that conversation with our clients. So if you make automatic checkout in the supermarket, what's going to happen to the bright and very good people that you have, like right now, delivering that experience? So at least try to bring that in, just like we try to bring in, circular issues or sustainability issues. It's not always that, it fits into a project, but I think also as designers, I think we have quite a big responsibility of, keep saying this. And I think you're also right if that's what you're indicating, that sometimes it comes in like, cycles and waves. Then there's a lot of unemployment because of IT, and then suddenly there's a lot of employment in IT. And I think it goes a bit like that in different geographies and, markets and so on. But I think we need to, it's part of thinking in a sustainable, circular way, I think.
Right, but as we living species have sort of a life cycle of starting to born to getting raised to kids and become adult, and then eventually pass away.
Yeah.
I think the any industry will follow this kind of path, and organizations as well. So there's a phase of growing industry and the phase of matured industry, and then somebody else would take over. If you look at the energy, coal industry has been very important part of the society in one society, and then it got took over by something else, and then by something else. It continues. Japan has been known for consumer electronics. Initially, the the LCD TVs, or phones. Keitai, the mobile phones, was leading the way. Then suddenly there was a disruption, and another country is taking over, and that country is going to be disrupted by yet another country. So there's always this ripple effect of transition.
Yeah.
And if we try to avoid that, then in a way we are also saying we don't want to evolve or change.
Yeah, that is true, and I think even though I don't want to sound like someone who just lives in the little box called Denmark. I mean, that's a very small project, with 5 million people. It's almost like a pilot project. But I think when we look to other industries, and also having lived for a while in the U.S., Denmark as a small nation, right, is very industrious, very inventive. We invent a lot of things. So wind turbines and the whole mobile telephony came partly out of that region. We're not very good at scaling things up. We can start up, but we can't scale up. And so that means every time something, reaches like a certain size, we give it away to somebody else. But I think it's a very good point, and I think design has a role to play in a very strategic way to have the conversation with, the industry and also in society. I mean, what's our competitive edge, and how do we want to, like stepping stones, leaving this one, jumping to another one before it's too late, and handing it off to, a competitor nation. That's what we do sometimes,
So let me ask you another question. You touched upon fintech and all these emerging, again, shift from the traditional sense of banking to a digital, physical, hybrid banking called fintech. How do you see this transition, trying to look at some legal issues governed by physical border called country? Every country has different legal scheme around financial services. But digital technology is really crossing borders. And how do you design? You said you want to have people first. How do you ensure your service that you design can be adaptive to each regional cultures, could be distinctly different? And also, how do you look into the legal framework of what one country is legal and one country is illegal?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think at least for us, the good thing about the whole like global, banking money industry, it is very fragmented. And after the crisis in 2008, a lot of things were split, US, Europe, Asia, and so on. So, I don't know, but it's kind of, that's regulation, and it seems that, for political, economical reasons, we want to keep that separate, meaning that I think we apply what we learn in, say, making a new mobile bank in Lima in Peru. We can use some of the same kind of, like the human learnings in this, like when we make a bank in Germany, or for that sake here in Japan, but it's just in different ways. And in some odd way, it's same, but different. But banks are very local in a way, even though they operate in a global way. I mean, they have their national kind of regulation, which gives designers a lot of work, I think.
You also work with public sector like governments and so regulators to inspire them to have changes in the rule sets, because the rules are designed for previous society and obviously it's outdated, and we need to challenge them to change.
Yeah, right. And that's, I think, and I guess also here in Japan to a certain extent, in the US not so much, the whole thing about private-public. So where I come from, we have a single sign-on system that makes everybody, from like kids to, not kids, but like, 16 years old, you get this called Easy ID, which is a single sign-on, and it works like it's just one click and you're on. You can do taxes, healthcare, and booking your doctor and all kinds of things. And that sparks a lot of innovation in the private sector, in the banks, because suddenly they have like a safe standard for single sign-on that they don't have to maintain that. So they can focus on doing the other part of the innovation. And I think that's a lot of opportunity that some countries don't have, because they believe that private sector is the only thing that works. So I wouldn't say I'm a fan of regulation, but I've learned a lot about like the way a lot of European countries and also Scandinavian countries have been organized. You pay a lot of taxes, but also you get something in return. You prepay healthcare, you prepay education. So it's not just bad paying a high tax.
So before we open up to the floor, so your definition of design and the scope of the work at Designit, it feels you are really expanding the definition of design. So what are some important skills for the next generation designers who might work for Designit?
Good point. I think we actually had that conversation today. So the whole concept of being T-shaped, which I think is great, but maybe it's time to move on to something else, which we've been tinkering with this idea of what if people were cross-shaped, like an X? So actually I have one talent. I mean, one crossbar would be I'm damn good at coding or whatever. And hey, I'm actually quite creative, or I went to train at a business school. I'm good at, that stuff as well. I'm a business designer. If you put that on top of each other, I think you have the perfect hybrid of something creative, analytical, and you can kind of, flex it a bit and add more, crossbars to it. I think that would, so the hybrid kind of cross-shaped individual, I think that's what a lot of companies are looking for, whatever they call it, cross-shaped or not. Flexible, adaptive people that can deal with uncertainty, with change, with risk and stuff like that, and also can get things done. So going back to the UN project, not a lot of talk and thinking, but also, some action and some delivery,
So that means design schools need to redesign themselves so that you have this cross-shape talents.
Yeah, I think that's one pretty, I think that's a good investment to do also in yourself. I think we all have more talents that we should bring to the table. If I'm just an industrial designer, I can't think as a business consultant. I think that's not, it's not the times we're living in, I think the magic is in the mix of a lot of different things. That's what startups are made of.
So you are trained as a designer in the very first slides. And then your another class is obviously CEO or the business. How many kind of lines do you have that crosses?
Yeah, so I would say still my trade is industrial design, so shaping things. And I'm happy to see that there's a lot of attention on physical design, actually, also like in IoT. And then the other side, I guess, I'm the president of Designit, so I'm supposed to make Designit great again. No, but that's actually I think I have the best job I can get, because I get to have all these interesting conversations and, on culture, on beliefs, on ethics, on where, design is going. And I really, appreciate that. Maybe I'm one of the talking heads and I should be working a bit more, not just talking.
Okay, so it's time to open up to the floor. I know the problem of Japanese or Asian society is the first penguin is always hard to find. Once we have one hand up, the rest is easy. But so, anybody who's brave enough to raise hand? Oh, here's one. Thank you.
So I think the design thinking or the philosophy of human-centered is getting popular, not only in Japan, but in the world. In that kind of society, what kind of future society do you envision or do you hope for?
Yeah, that's a very important thing, right? That when we're talking about the smart future and, the place that we're going to live in, our kids are going to live in, I think a lot about, like, still, the way that we as human beings sometimes get tangled up in complicated things, systems, or I showed some of them. So I dream of, like, a more seamless world, I guess. And I remember when, I'm not going to mention the brand, but when I bought my first smart TV, I don't think that was very smart at all, and I just, like, switched the whole smart thing off. And the moment I got it, I thought, can somebody give me, like, a wise TV that makes, the right decisions for me? So, but I dream of, we have this vision of a human-shaped world, and that came out of, like, after 20, 30 years of, like, human-centric thinking. Somehow we're still in a very bad place, with doors that we cannot open, and bank systems that don't work, and healthcare systems with waiting lines. So we're dreaming about this, like, human-shaped world. And, the example that we sometimes use is that we want to take human-centric, all of us, to the next level sometimes or somehow. So if I were to buy a new shoe, would you like a human-centric shoe or a human-shaped shoe? I would have it human-shaped, with more focus on really something that fits into my life. I know it's a bit philosophical, but I think we all dream of like an easy future where we just, like, breeze through. Maybe we're getting lazy, I don't know, but things can be easier, I must say.
Okay, so let's look for the second one. By the way, 日本語でも構わないので、動詞通訳ありますから、日本語でも結構です。So he's our design faculty.
日本語でやった方がいいんですか？
No, in English. If you can speak English.
Okay.
Please.
Okay.
New York English is fine.
Well, being in the same field, there's and design thinking and being applied it's a special renaissance because of the decentralization of so many industries and digitization, especially when you think about products that you're working on, like for banking and for insurance, where the efficiencies to them are very important. And but it doesn't seem that the rate of change can be supported for really large problems, like with the environment, because government structures are not changing fast enough. And to try to have a discussion about, like, the structure of government and the role of government is so big. And when do you think the decentralization and the same types of skills that we're applying to business problems are going to be applied to governments and to world governance? I know you're not an expert on government, but I always, I always feel I should ask this question.
That's a very good question. In Japan, the government is always saying we want to shoot and redesign the government for a smaller government called Chisana Seifu. But they just talk about it. We don't see it happen. Anyway, so.
Yeah, and that's I mean, it was a question, but I agree to the question. It's a very interesting one. And I remember at one visit out here, we met with a lot of different, institutions. And then one of, the slides were, what if Japan were to be the first country with, I think we called it like a usability minister, a minister of user experience, or, like kind of a chief design officer, but at government level, right? I just came back from Dubai, and of all places in the world, I mean, they just appointed a minister of happiness and positivity, which I think is, it's a statement, it's a great start, and I think it's very, well funded. So maybe that brings some hope, but you're right, it is a very, it's big, complicated system. If corporate complexity is complicated to deal with, political systems, I guess, is even worse, And I'm limited in my thinking here because I come from a country, that's basically a pilot project. 5 million people thinking the same way, looking the same way, digitized, homogeneous, and so on. So I'm afraid I don't have a good question to answer to that, but I think design policy at government level is super important. Believing in it both as a growth engine, but also as a change maker. And I think a lot of politicians, they like to talk about design. Problem is they don't always, walk the talk.
Well, that's like having a chief
Can you use the mic?
That's like having a chief marketing officer that's never marketed anything, or someone who's head of design at a big corporation that doesn't understand design. So I understand it's a big problem, but it's something really interesting, especially when you think about, you wrote about top down and bottom up. There are just certain issues that cannot be. One of the big issues I always challenge students is this whole pet bottle thing. Like, you can design so many Kickstarters for disposable bottles, but until that material is made illegal, you're not going to have change. So, and that's a very simple linear example. But there are other examples with where you can show. I love that you brought up Uber, and I think Uber is totally. I would get into arguments in the U.S. where people say, "Oh, but they don't give health insurance," and I was like, "But the taxi doesn't give health insurance in the U.S. either." So you're not comparing apples to apples. You have to really look at efficiencies, and efficiencies in governments, they certainly don't. It's hard to get that type of thinking, like the type of design thinking to efficiencies with government. But so I would add that into the equation, and in addition to ethics, efficiencies, I'd like to see designers start thinking about that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think that's, there's a lot of like, new layers that we need to add to this profession somehow, because what we find is that, believe it or not, a lot of, like the higher ups, like CEOs and top brass and boardrooms, they want to have this conversation, and what designers, maybe we're not, the biggest, like, even though we call ourselves like thought leaders and stuff, we usually have a quite strong point of view on what to do and what not to do, and I think that's very much appreciated. We just don't write an invoice for it.
So KMD is seen very unique because we're design school, but we are technology school, and we're doing business, so we're seen as a business school. We are ranked very high. And we are also policy school, because without policy, we get stuck, especially when you scale up the project and trying to influence for the social impact. So I think designers to be for the next generation is not only about, it is true, beautifying things is very important, but the traditional sense of designer needs to be very much expanded into, you also think about business model, how you disrupt new type of thinking to be viable, but also that also might challenge to change the regulation, and also how do you change the government, how do you change the region. UN, I'm sure, is very bureaucratic.
Yeah, totally, and I think we have the privilege of working for the small rock and roll boys, that are part of the UN but not part of the UN. So I think maybe they can bring this change about. We had a conversation when we started up out here in Tokyo on interesting conversation, not very like profitable or fruitful, but the focus of many governments on, for the Olympics, for example, like focus on hard infrastructure. We want some bridges and some railroads and some, all that stuff that you're really, very tangible. Instead, you want to focus on the soft infrastructure. I mean, the experience infrastructure in the city, there's a lot of money to be made there. And but that conversation is so hard to get started. You know, people listen. I mean, the people with the money, they listen, but they don't like, you know, really listen.
Okay, so let's move on. Over there, please.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'm interested in how like changes in the material environment can actually sort of elicit changes in the value systems of societies. Like based on our daily experiences, it seems like the emotional reactions that we have to things will inevitably end up sort of changing our values. Like with social media, for example, it's recently like come into fire for how it's changed the public discourse or the sorts of like expectations that we have about our lives. Like I was really interested in like, for example, the climate change like RPG that you brought up. Like it seems like, you know, it may be possible to sort of like intentionally try to like bring these sorts of values into question, not into question, into being through these like design initiatives. But I was wondering if you have any ideas about like, you know, how that can be like specifically planned for in terms of like how those values will arise, and if it's like too dangerous or maybe even too manipulative to think like in those terms.
So, can you, I mean, what's the question actually?
Oh, sorry. What are your thoughts on like deliberately trying to use design in order to bring about like new values in society?
So the last part, sorry, I'm just...
Is the design, how do you design things to bring new value to society?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a damn good and a very big question, right? I think going back to the, you know, that black, you know, kind of circle, you know, round shape that I shared with you, I think sometimes you do a lot of things, and hopefully what you do, I mean, the sum of it, I mean, somehow makes sense. I mean, there's hits and misses. I think that's the business we're in. But I'm having a hard time to see how we can solve, you know, these really, really big, you know, like issues that we're dealing with. I mean, the guy, maybe you saw that project, I mean, collecting plastic and plastic bottles, I mean, you know, in the oceans. The young guy, Boyan Slad, I think that's a great take on it. It's like 1,000 times as much as we will probably ever do. And it's still not enough somehow. And he designed like a thinking, the fundraising, the system, and all that. So I'm not sure it was an answer, but a try.
Okay, so anybody else over there?
Hi. So we've been talking, or you've been talking a lot about a human future, human-shaped design, which I think is really relevant, especially in this digital age that we are living in. A lot of anthropologists and sociologists all say that culture is maybe a hidden dimension of the human species. So I was wondering, as a CEO, as a founder of a design company that's on a global scale, what are kind of is culture a thing that you consider a lot, and how does this influence your human-shaped future?
Okay, wow, beautiful question. The answer is yes, yes, yes. No, culture is a super important thing. I mean, I don't know how culture is created. I mean, you know, I guess the moment you start up a company, I mean, the first like 20 seconds, culture is created. The next like 2 years, more culture is created, more people join. And you share this, you know, belief system or passion or whatever. I don't know what the glue is. And I think you could, but I know that, you know, one day when you realize that your culture kind of, you know, went somewhere and you don't have it because strategy is more important or efficiency is more important. It's a bit like running out of oxygen. You don't think of it, but once it's not there, you feel that, you know, there's no culture. So I think big companies, they either, you know, grow successfully or they go under, you know, because of culture.
Your company has gone through acquisition, and that means importing different culture into your company. And you have multiple different sort of regional cultural locations, and each employees there, local employees, have different lifestyle and different value sets. So the more you expand this way, it becomes very difficult to maintain and sustain and disseminate your original culture of Designit.
Yes, that is true. But if, I mean, have a look around, there's like one strategic design firm left, which is, I think, Smart Design. Very, great guys, super talented guys. I've met with them a couple of times, doing great things. The rest of us, we kind of, gave in and realized that this is a tough game, because when the big global services firms and consultants, move into this space, we're gonna get crushed, And because many of them are giving the design bit away for free. It's just, the shiny object. So look, this design, we're gonna design that, mobile ticketing experience for you. It's like 2 million whatever currency, a lot of money. And then, there's like a big IT project waiting that's much more profitable, like a 10-year, biometric airport safety kind of project. So nobody cares about the design bit, even though it's the most, I think the most important part. So a lot of us, voluntarily joined a bigger organization. We're part of a big tech firm. And yes, we still believe, like you said in your beginning, creating magic at the intersection of design and technology. We think that's what we want to do. I think we also, both us and Wipro, realized that this is probably not going to take 10 months, but maybe 10 years to really fuse these two like very different mindsets, cultures, what have you, together. But I think the world needs it. The day designers are in the engine room where the big complicated IT systems or political mistakes are being made, I think we have a chance of creating something that's really good for us as human beings and citizens. But it's tough, and now the next wave is coming. So the smaller, boutique-sized firms are being scooped up and, fitted into the bigger organization. So, but culture is interesting. I think also KMD has a culture, needs a certain culture that kind of. Sometimes we talk about brand as a visual thing. I think brand is made of culture. Basically, you can take away the logo and all that, shit, and still, if you have culture left, you'll survive as a brand, I think.
Okay, so I think, unfortunately, the time is up. So let's have a big round of applause for thanking. Great talk, inspiration.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure being here.
So thank you very much for coming. So thank you very much for coming, and we hope to see you again in the future Serendipity series. Thank you.